So I've quite openly talked about my disdain for Game of Thrones on this channel before, but that being said, for the last couple of months I've also been working on writing one of my high fantasy novels, and you got me thinking about other high fantasy books and which ones are good and which ones are not. When it comes to modern fantasy, people to look at is George R.R. Martin, just like you look at Tolkien and people like that. So with that being said, I'm not going to talk about the books as much as I'm going to be talking about the TV show, because I haven't read any of the books yet. From the TV show standpoint, I didn't like the TV show, but here are some things I did kind of appreciate about it and are highlights for me, despite not really wanting to go watch it again or really enjoy it. I had to admit that these are things I look to, and I'm like, I like that. This is a positive. So there's no particular order to this. It's just 15 things I really like about Game of Thrones, and I think it did right. And some of them might actually surprise you. The first one, it would be the world building. It's just, I personally don't think it's as great as The Lord of the Rings, but in the same way, you don't really have to compare them. You can just be like, yeah, Lord of the Rings is good world building. A Song of Ice and Fire has good world building. I love how you have the setup with the Seven Kingdoms and how the politics work. You have these other kingdoms outside of that. You build up this world in a great way. Like, it's just well set up in this series. In the first little bit, you start in the north, you start with just building up there, and then you go to King's Landing. You slowly build up. In the first couple of seasons, you just build up the rest of the kingdom. And it's in a safe, good way, something that we looked at on how to do world building. I think it does a great job with that. In the same way, you also have, the history of Westeros. I still haven't read any of the books, or actually haven't watched the other series, the prequels and all of House of the Dragon and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But I do know about them, and I know what happens in them somewhat. And so I'm like, yeah, that's also nice. The fact that you have these extended stories going on before the time, and how, what was it like when the Targaryens ran the Seven Kingdoms. I wish we had more of what happened after A Game of Thrones. But I think the world building is great. I think the history is great. The next one is the music. It's iconic. I'm going to be talking about later about a certain song from this that I really like, but there are certain songs in this, The Last Stark, of course the opening theme, like all these songs, just the music, it's just high fantasy music that's just so good and so enjoyable to listen to. I'm like, I love the music in this. I think The Lord of the Rings has better music, but again, I'm biased towards The Lord of the Rings as my favorite movie series and my favorite books. I'm just automatically, if I had to compare it to something, I'm always going to say The Lord of the Rings is better, but I do like the music in this. The next one is the cinematography. The cinematography is incredible in certain shots. I love those videos where it's just like beautiful sceneries from Game of Thrones. It's like, yeah, there was some great stuff. There are some terrible stuff, like the long night and how the darkness there, and how you can't see anything, but there are moments in this like, wow, that is a beautiful scenery, or that is well shot, or there are great moments in this series with the cinematography and all. Not just the landscape, but also just how it films different scenes. It's just different angles to get at. Overall, this series as a whole, with these first couple, I'm talking about this more, is the series as a whole is well made. It's a very well made series. It's just problems to the story that I have and all, and some characters, and which I can talk about in a different review with more negative stuff. You also, on the same note, you have the costumes are well done. I was telling someone recently, I think it was a couple months ago, I was like, yeah, with my longer hair and my beard now, I could dress up as someone from Game of Thrones and actually kind of fit in. I would totally want to get a cloak like Jon Snow's cloak and just be living in that world. It looks. This costumes are well done, and it's a high fantasy. I'm gonna have to, in a different video, talk about why I don't like it, because it's when I really think about some of this stuff, it's yeah, everything about this seems like it would be the perfect thing for someone like me, but I don't like it, and there are reasons for that. Yeah, it's the world building, the music, cinematography, costumes, all these are great. And the next one being the battles is also on the same note. It's not all of the battles are great. There are moments in these battles I don't like. Just some character deaths and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, really, guys, don't do this. But in the same way, some of these battles are incredibly shot, well done. The acting is great. That's another thing of the series, I guess, that I didn't have on my list. And now I just realized I didn't have on my list. But yeah, the acting is great too. How the battles are scripted is just well done, where you can really dive into the strategy and all that type of stuff of this. And I love it. I love like watching these battle scenes play out because it's like, yeah, when it comes to high fantasy, it's pretty good with its battles. And then you have also on that same note, you have like some of the characters. I mean, some of the characters are just, you have Jaime and Tyrion Lannister. Well done, both of them. Jaime as the misunderstood hero who saved King's Landing and being treated like he's a traitor to the crown, and how he killed the Mad King, where really what he did was he saved all King's Landing from being burnt down, which is a good foreshadowing to what happens in Season 8. Even how bad Season 8 is, it foreshadowed from the beginning Targaryens and their love of trying to burn down King's Landing. But, like, he's a misunderstood character. You have Tyrion Lannister, the imp of the family. He is the smartest of the family, and and he's most like his father, but gets treated terribly because he killed his mom. He did all this terrible stuff, and he's constantly having to live up to that. You have all these different characters, Arya Stark, Sansa Stark, all these different characters that are like well fleshed out characters with great moments. I could probably spend like 20 minutes just talking about each of these characters that I love. There are plenty of characters I don't like that fill up the series, but it's like they're like you do have characters that I generally love, like even characters who died before the end of the series. You have like Robb Stark. I thought he was a pretty cool character. He wasn't my favorite character, but it's like he was a pretty well-grounded character who I wanted to see him succeed because he was a good person like his father. You have, of course, Ned Stark, too. You have Jon Snow. Jon Snow is like one of those characters which we'll have to talk about in our negative review about what happens with Jon Snow and how, I will talk about it later in this video when I get to Jon Snow's identity, because that's on the list. But it's like, Jon Snow is a great character, the bastard who figures out he's more than that. He becomes the king of the North because of he wins everyone's respect and all, and I like that. And the next one is the Game of Thrones. Not the series, but as in the whole plot line of the Game of Thrones, where it's everyone's fighting for the crown, and it's really well done. I mean, it's the Battle of the Roses. That's what it is. That's what he's based off of, and it's well done. Where you have each of these people who actually have the right. Again, we'll get to Jon Snow in a little bit and how he plays into this, but it's really the first couple of seasons where you have the Game of Thrones.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
I was invested in that, and who's going to win? I already knew that it wasn't going to go anywhere, but in the same way, I did like those first couple seasons where you really played into the politics and the whole fight over the throne that was going on. I thought that was nice. In the end, they didn't succeed with that, but it was still an interesting storyline, and I feel like Game of Thrones is one of those things that should have ended at maybe 5 seasons at most. It went on for way too long, and really it lost its purpose by most of the way through the series. I would have to look it up exactly which season for myself was the falling out moment, but I'm just saying 5 seasons is a pretty good number to say of after 5 seasons it got old. Actually, honestly, it got old for me after the pilot, but that's a different story. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty good storyline that sadly didn't go where it should have. On the same note, you also have the other storyline of the Long Winter, or the White Walkers. The great idea of these creatures that can raise people from the dead, and they have a zombie army, and it's I really like how you open up the series with White Walkers, and it's okay, it's very much there from the beginning, and it's not until season 8 that you finally get the Long Winter and all, but it's I don't know, it's a great storyline. Now we're going to get into some more personal moments, or certain storylines, starting with Sansa's and Tyrion's relationship. It would have been nice to see them go further with that. I did like the whole thing of, just how he was very kind to her, and that's what she needed. And he needed that someone to be kind to her, and it shows that he was a gentleman and that he was doing something right. He was being a good person, and I think the whole relationship and having that, I really liked their storyline together. They worked well together. They were in a forced relationship, and they found a way to mutually work through it, and in a good way to show that they both had a caring for each other and a mutual respect. Trust between them. I thought it was great. And the next one is where Arya gets revenge on House Frey for the Red Wedding.
Leave one wolf alive and the sheep are never safe.
The badass moment of she's such a badass character, and I love that moment, just her
when people ask you what happened here, tell them the North remembers. Tell them winter came for House Frey.
Incredible moments. It brought justice to one of the worst moments of the series, which is also somewhat, I have to admit, a pretty good moment. It's not on my list, but the Red Wedding, as it goes, I hate that moment, but in the same way, I had to have respect for how well done it is. The next one is Jon Snow's true identity. From the very beginning, Jon Snow, the bastard, he's treated lesser, and slowly you see him building up to be this great leader, and it's like, the moment you reveal, guess what? He is the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. They literally had the best twist. The whole series building up this character of Jon Snow from this bastard to the rightful king. Imagine having the series end with him on the throne. It would have been from the beginning to the end, perfect, these people are fighting over the people who conquered over the Targaryens. And while you have this other Targaryen trying to get back to her rightful throne, only realize in the end that, guess what? This bastard who had been rightfully gaining people's trust and grown up in the ranks now reveals, guess what? The whole time he was the rightful king. It would have been an epic moment of having all the good people, all the allies just in that moment be like, kneel, like this rightful king. I just recently, I had to put out a review for it sometime, but I just recently watched season 1 and 2 of House of David, and it kind of reminds me of, the ending of season 2, how all those soldiers kneeling down to David, the rightful king. It's like, that's the moment they should have had in Game of Thrones, is when people realized that he was the rightful king. Everyone was like, I kneel down to you. You are the rightful king. That's what it should have been. It was such well set up for those seasons of having, he's the rightful king and he deserves it. And then they destroyed it in the end. But I love that storyline where when it was revealed, I already knew it was coming, but in the same way, it was like, this is brilliant. I'm going to have to make a video sometime, even though everyone else has done it already, about the ending of Game of Thrones and how terrible it is. But oh man, there are some moments in that ending that's like, why? Why did you do that? With that being said, the last 3 are actually all Season 8, and I'll talk about more of that in my end after I'm done with talking about these. Next one is Jenny Oldstone. I listen to the song probably at least a couple times a month. Ever since I watched the series, for the last 5 years, I've listened to that song at least a couple times every month. It's such a good song. I'm not going to sing it because I don't know if you guys would want to hear me sing. And also, I don't know if I can sing it for copyright reasons, but I love that song. It's so well done. It's such a great song. There are a bunch of characters I don't care about, and just as it's playing that song over, and you see all these characters about to go out to battle, and it's just, for a moment, I cared about these characters I shouldn't have cared, I didn't want to care about, because the song just moved you to be like the sadness. Some people might not come back, and it's just, the song was well in the scene. It's also just a good song that I like to listen to, and I like to sing sometimes when I'm alone. The next one is also on the same note. The only moment in Game of Thrones where I ever cried was during the funeral at the end of the long night. You see all the funeral mounds and all. And it was just like, I didn't care about these characters, especially Theon Greyjoy. Hated that character for the whole series. And just seeing his body and seeing how Sansa reacts at that moment, just something like everything didn't matter. I didn't care that this was a character I hated. I was moved in that moment to be like, he's dead. Like, why is he dead? Like, no. Like, I felt for I felt for the people around him, just from the fact, not because he was a great character, but because of the people around him. And the scene was well done, and it's in the back of my head constantly. I don't know why I was moved by that scene so much, but I was moved by it. These characters I didn't even care about, I was moved. Maybe it was because of Jenny Oldstone and having that scene where you see them before the battle and you see the love there, and then feeling that these people are going to be missed. Suddenly now, they're gone. Brings up those feelings, and I thought it was great. And the last one I'm going to mention on my list is the one that's going to be very controversial for a lot of people, because it's one of the things they hate the most. But I actually did like the whole thing with Daenerys burning down King's Landing. I personally think it was built up, not perfectly, but in the same way you have it where I think in the prequels, Anakin Skywalker was not perfectly set up to become Darth Vader. But in the same way, I still loved him turning into Darth Vader. In the same way I did, I don't think it was perfectly set up, but on paper, when you think about each scene, right, for the whole series, it's blown up, the same Daenerys who burned down King's Landing is not the same Daenerys who was that shy girl who was forced in that marriage with Count Drogo. That woman grew into, you see through the series, where she's more willing to just kill people. And then having it so she just snaps was not perfectly set up, but I think, as I said earlier with Jaime's character, and how from the very beginning it set up this idea that Targaryens can do stuff like this. Having at the end where she does it, I think it was not the best setup, but in the same way, I kind of like the idea of her, when she finally gets there, boom, she snaps and she just destroys everything. Was it the best? Maybe not, but I do kind of, I can't deny it, I kind of like it. With that being said, there are plenty of other things I like about Game of Thrones. It's just those are the things that popped in my head when I was writing up this video. Not all of these are perfect. I think there are great moments in Game of Thrones. There are plenty of moments I hate. You guys can love Game of Thrones. You guys can hate Game of Thrones. I don't care. These are my thoughts of a Game of Thrones. Something as I promised, there was going to be some stuff that surprised you. And one of the big things, as much as I think Game of Thrones fell apart at the end, as you saw, most of my moments that I loved about Game of Thrones all came from the later seasons. There are plenty of things about the ending that I hate, but I can't hide the fact that, honestly, as someone who's not a fan of Game of Thrones, I somehow find that the bad ending moments, no, these are not the bad ending moments, but these moments from the end of the series are my favorite. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. This has been the Movie Night Reviewer, Peter Wary, signing off.